Hi, we are going to present to you the Board of Directors of Marks & Spencer's, the international financial risks currently facing Marks & Spencer's and solutions to address these risks. Marks & Spencer's, being a large multinational retailer, has enjoyed 137 years of operation, with 1972 seeing its first international store opening in Canada and branching to many international destinations in the subsequent years. 2020 saw 1,038 M&S stores in the UK and 481 other stores around the world, with approximately 75,000 people being employed worldwide. An unfortunate effect of COVID-19 will see a portion of these stores closed and staff losing their jobs in the not-so-distant future. The benefits to international trade are many, and as a multinational trader enjoying these benefits, M&S also faces international risks. We will discuss the most pertinent risks to M&S and ways to mitigate these risks associated with global trading. M&S face foreign exchange risk, political risk, market imperfection risk, and risks arising from Brexit and COVID-19. Hedging strategies can mitigate these risks. The foreign exchange market, in a loose definition, is a market encompassing the conversion of purchasing power from one country into another, bank deposits of foreign currency, the extension of credit denominated in a foreign currency, foreign trade financing, and also trading in a foreign currency derivatives. It is the largest and most active financial market worldwide. It is a two-tier market, with M&S falling into the retail market tier. In the retail market tier, international banks service customers like M&S who need foreign exchange to carry out international business. Foreign exchange risk, also referred to as currency risk, is a substantial risk for M&S that losses can incur on international financial transactions due to changes in foreign exchange rates, that is, changes in currency values. Exchange rates float freely, hence there are constant fluctuations. As a multinational, risks arise from financial transactions denominated in a particular currency that have to be converted to British pound. Any fluctuation in another currency causes a change in home currency, hence a change in the value of the transaction. Changes in exchange rates can have a substantial impact on M&S position in the international market, its cash flows, and market values. Three types of foreign exchange risk can potentially alter M&S cash flow. These include transaction risk, which can be referred to as short-term economic exposure, as here M&S domestic currency cash flows can be affected by settlement of contracted cash flows denominated in foreign currencies. Transaction risk or exposure is the sensitivity of realised British pound currency values on M&S contractual cash flows that have been denominated in any currency other than British pound to unexpected changes in exchange rate. Fixed rate contracting results in transaction exposure, as exchange rates are floating freely and constantly changing. M&S faces risk when buying produce, for example, from other countries like the US, and the produce price fixed in US dollar for payment on delivery at a certain time in the future. If the US dollar rises against the British pound during the time period between now and delivery, M&S will have to pay more British pound for this transaction, in effect incurring a loss on the transaction. At any time M&S have foreign currency denominated payables or receivables, it will be exposed to transaction risk, and the magnitude of the exposure is equal to the amount of foreign currency that is payable or receivable. As M&S have grown and developed its international trading, management of this increased risk in proportion to the increased international trading needs careful management. We also have economic risk. This risk, also known as forecast risk, is the risk to M&S market value from unanticipated changes in exchange rates. Anticipated changes are discounted and already reflected in M&S's value. These unanticipated changes can have a profound effect on M&S market value as well as cash flows. M&S market value is impacted on a continuous basis as they are continuously exposed to currency fluctuations. There is also translation risk or translation exposure. This is the risk of M&S consolidated financial statements being affected by changes in exchange rate. M&S can face losses when international stores' financial statements denominated in other currencies are translated back to British pound. M&S has subsidiaries in the USA that will produce financial statements in US dollar, and then to consolidate worldwide financial statements, these US dollar statements will be translated to British pound. Translation involves issues that can be controversial. Losses and gains from translation are an attempt to measure exposure to the economy ex post. However, it is not a good measure of ex ante economic exposure.
Political risk for a business refers to first and foremost economic threats caused due to events like trade war, terrorism, or disagreement between heads of two or more nations. We can say it is the risk of losing money due to unstable governments, economy, or threatened nations. Political risk includes taxes, spending, regulations, currency valuation, trade tariffs, such as labor laws, minimum wage, and environmental regulations. Marks and Spencers is operating in retails in dozen of countries and exposes itself to different type of political risk. One of the example of political risk is breakout in Middle Eastern countries like Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Libya, as they have put international trade barriers, which is considered to be a negative factor for Marks and Spencers, as it limits the business opportunities of Marks and Spencers with those countries. Coming up to market imperfections, none of the market in this world are perfect market. In real world, perfect market does not exist. To explain the concept of market imperfections, we can say any economic market that does not meet rigorous standards of hypothetically perfect or purely competitive market. Even if the one condition of perfect market is not met, it is considered to be an imperfect market. Imperfect market consists of high barriers to entry and exit, competition for market share, small numbers of buyers and sellers, prices that are not set by supply and demand, information asymmetry, and many more things. Imperfect market consists of high barriers to entry and exit, competition for market share, small numbers of buyers and sellers, prices that are not set by supply and demand, information asymmetry, and many more things. The retail sector has a low threat of new entrants due to high capital investment cost needed to enter the market. However, despite considerable barriers to entry and exit, Marks and Spencer is facing incoming competition in both clothing and its food sectors. Brands like Zara, H&M, George and Madeline are targeting loyal Marks and Spencer customers with their lower price range of products. In food sector, online platform like Oscada has covered the market share of tradition store-only food retailers, whereas the Marks and Spencer's website has not gained a foothold in its own consumers.
Hi, my name is Victoria, and I'll be taking you through the international financial risk that has risen as a result of Brexit and COVID 19. So, first of all, Brexit came into effect officially on the 1st of January 2021, which meant that the United Kingdom left the EU officially. And the implication of this meant that there were restrictions to the movement of goods and services from the United Kingdom across other European countries. And for a company like Market Spencer, which is global and deals with a lot of international trade, the company was faced with the risk of non-availability of goods and services as at when due, especially across the European Union. And Mark and Spencer having suppliers and distributors in the United Kingdom meant that some of their goods were sourced from the UK, and this meant that there was a high chance or there's a high risk of goods not being available as at when due, and this would therefore have an impact on the reputation of the company as well as the level of profitability for the company. Then, secondly, COVID also brought about a lot of uncertainties, not just for companies but also for consumers. But on the part of Mark and Spencer, due to the increase in a lot of expenses like shipping cost and all of that, there was a high cash flow constraint. I mean, comparing the financial performance of the company from 2019 to 2020, you can see that there's a 2% decline in the level of revenue. And this is just as at March. So you can imagine the impacts that COVID would have had on it going forward. So when there's a constraint on cash flow, it means that the company will not be able to meet up its day-to-day obligations, such as fulfilling its debt covenants and um, paying for administrative costs that the company is going to incur. And this can therefore have a significant impact on the level of profitability for the company as well. And then also, Mark and Spencer also provided banking support in terms of credit facilities and loan facilities to consumers and third parties, and seeing that COVID did not just affect companies but it also affected individuals. This meant that there was a the company was equally faced with credit risk, meaning that there was a high chance that consumers would not be able to pay up for the debts that they had taken because there has been a constraint to the level of income that they were receiving. So all of this risk can definitely have an impact on Mark and Spencer's level of profitability. And so therefore there needs to be steps to mitigate this risk to the barest minimum so as not to have a significant impact on the level of profitability for the company.
Thank you, colleagues, for highlighting the risk. Now we will talk about the hedging strategies. As we know, hedging strategies are the risk management strategies employed to offset losses in the investment by taking just the opposite position in the related assets. But as a note of caution, the reduction in the risk by hedging generally translates into the reduction in the potential profits. There are other arguable reasons why hedging is more important. First one being information asymmetry. Management knows the firm's exposure much better than any stockholder. Therefore, the management of the firm should manage the exchange exposure. Second being differential transaction costs. The firm is in a position to acquire low cost hedges, whereas for an individual stockholder, the cost could be substantially high. Third is default cost. If the default cost is significant, corporate hedging would be justifiable because it will reduce the probability of default risk. And the perception of reduced default risk can lead to better credit rating and lower financing cost. Now, as we know how important the hedging strategies are, we will talk about the hedging options available to Marks and Spencer. Perhaps the most direct and popular way of hedging transaction cost is by currency forward contract. M&S could use this binding contract in the foreign exchange market that locks in the foreign exchange rate in a future event of sale or purchase. M&S could also hedge its transaction exposure by lending and borrowing in domestic and foreign money market, also known as money market hedge. Year on year, M&S has larger payables than receivable since its collection period is shorter than payments. Therefore, we will include an example of hedging the future payments in US dollar. To hedge the future payment, M&S can borrow the pounds in an equivalent amount of the present value of the payments, then convert it into the US dollars. It can thereafter deposit the amount until the payment is required to be made. However, one shortcoming that both money market hedge and forward contract would have is that they will completely eliminate the foreign currency exposure risk. So the company will have to forego the benefits that they could get from the upside of the foreign exchange exposure. With options, the company can manage the downside risk as well as gain from the upside risk. Since M&S has business in many countries, it is also exposed to risk in minor currencies. What it can do is to identify a major currency which is directly correlated to the minor currency and hedge its minor currency exposure through that major currency. To conclude, we will list out some of the hedging instruments available to Marks and Spencers. Thank you.